stop for a moment. Press the like button and subscribe to the channel because I am certain that you will enjoy this content from beginning to end. Now, take a deep breath, put on your headphones, sit back, and relax. Let me take you on a calm yet thrilling journey into the vast Asian steppes, where endless plains stretch to the horizon and the sky embraces golden grass swaying in the wind. There, one of the greatest empires in human history was born, the Mongol Empire. Its beginning was not the tale of kings living in palaces, nor of settled peoples dwelling between rivers and fertile fields. It began instead with simple nomadic tribes wandering endlessly in search of water and pasture, living on horseback, hunting and fighting for survival. From this harsh environment emerged a man who would change the course of the world, Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan. Temujin's childhood was far from easy. After his father was killed, he was left with his mother and siblings to face the cruelty of nature and the hostility of rival tribes. But hardship forged his character, shaping him into a leader of unshakable will. Through his military genius, his ability to win loyalty, and his strict enforcement of law, he managed to unite the warring tribes beneath a single banner. Thus, the Mongol Empire was born. Genghis Khan did not stop at the borders of Mongolia. With his swift army like a raging storm, he surged outward, sweeping through China, Central Asia, Russia, and even reaching the very gates of Europe. The hooves of Mongol horses thundered across thousands of kilometers, leaving behind destroyed cities and nations trembling at the very sound of the word Tatar. But as every beginning of glory carries within it the seed of decline, so too must every empire face its end. The question we will quietly explore tonight is this: how did the Mongol Empire collapse? How did this unstoppable force, once believed by many to be eternal, finally fall? After the death of Genghis Khan in 1227, the Mongol flame did not fade. Its fire blazed on in the hands of his sons and grandsons, who carried forward the banner of expansion and conquest. His eldest son, Ogedei Khan, assumed power after him, continuing the campaigns into China and laying down strong foundations for Mongol rule there. In the west, the Mongols swept across Russian lands, then advanced into Hungary and Poland, spreading terror across the whole of Europe. The Mongol army was a war machine unlike any the world had ever seen. Cavalry as fast as the storm, composite bows striking from great distances, and iron discipline that made them nearly invincible. Over the years, the Mongol Empire stretched to become the largest contiguous empire in history. From the shores of China in the east to the heart of Europe in the west, and from the icy steppes of Siberia in the north to the deserts of India and Persia in the south. This was not merely a military expansion. It was the opening of trade and cultural exchange between distant peoples. Under the Mongol Empire, the so-called Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace, was born. The great trade routes, such as the Silk Road, flourished once again. Caravans could now travel safely from Beijing to Baghdad, from Samarkand to Constantinople. goods flowed freely: Chinese silk, Indian spices, and the gold and silver of Europe and the Middle East. Even scholars and travelers found the doors of the world open before them. It was during this era that the famous Venetian traveler Marco Polo journeyed across Asia, reaching the court of Kublai Khan in China, and later wrote accounts that astonished Europe. This was the Mongol moment of triumph, when their empire seemed endless, a force that would never fade. Yet just as the highest mountains eventually see their peaks eroded, the Mongol Empire too began to weaken, not from outside at first, but from within. When power passed to Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, the empire reached the height of its glory. It was he who founded the Yuan dynasty in China, moved the capital to Beijing, built magnificent palaces, and made the Mongols the masters of the Far East. But the death of Kublai Khan in 1294 marked a dangerous turning point. After him, no strong leader remained who could unite the many tribes and ambitious princes under one rule. Conflicts erupted among the sons and grandsons of Genghis Khan. Each considered himself the rightful heir to the throne, and each desired a larger share of the empire's vast lands. Controlling such a colossal territory was no simple task. The empire eventually fractured into 4 great khanates: the Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, Iran, and Iraq, the Yuan dynasty in China and Mongolia. On the surface, these khanates recognized the symbolic authority of the Great Khan, the heir of Genghis Khan. But in truth, each Khan ruled his domain like an independent king, enforcing his own laws and waging his own wars. This division was not merely administrative, it was the beginning of the disintegration of Mongol unity, the very force that had once made them unstoppable. Instead of marching together as one army against their enemies, they now sometimes fought one another, competing for influence and conspiring against each other's power. Over time, the strength of each khanate weakened under the pressure of civil wars, economic troubles, and rebellions by the peoples they had once subdued by force. The mighty body forged by Genghis Khan began to crack, and fissures spread through the walls of what once seemed an eternal empire. While internal divisions were tearing the Mongol Empire apart from within, powerful forces were rising outside, ready to strike at the Mongols in their weakest moments. In the east, the Yuan dynasty in China faced mounting resistance. The Chinese people, who had suffered under Mongol rule for decades, grew weary of foreign domination. Peasant uprisings erupted, secret societies spread their influence, and at last came the Great Explosion, the Red Turban Rebellion, which toppled Mongol rule and established the Ming dynasty in 1368. Thus, the Mongols lost China, the richest and most vital part of their empire. In the West, matters were no better. In the Middle East, the Ilkhanate faced the rise of new local powers, the most formidable being the Mamluks of Egypt. The Mamluks delivered the Mongols their first true defeat in history at the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260. From that day forward, the Mongols' aura of invincibility in the region began to fade, and their influence declined steadily. In Russia, the Golden Horde maintained its grip for centuries, but the Russians never forgot the long years of Mongol domination. Over time, the small principality of Moscow grew stronger, becoming the nucleus of a new power. By the 15th century, the Russians under Ivan III rose up to challenge the Mongols and declared independence from the Golden Horde. Meanwhile, in Central Asia, the Chagatai Khanate was racked by tribal conflicts. New powers emerged, most notably Tamerlane, Timur, who challenged the remnants of Mongol rule and sought to restore their glory, but under his own name, not that of Genghis. These external pressures, combined with internal rebellions and endless divisions, struck the empire like hammer blows on hot iron. Each strike weakened it, each defeat brought it closer to its end. And as the great trade routes that had flourished under the Pax Mongolica grew increasingly unsafe, merchants began searching for alternative paths. From this shift, the course of world history itself would change. By the 14th and 15th centuries, the Mongol Empire had become but a shadow of its former might. The great Khanates that once shook the thrones of the world had grown weak, fragmented, and consumed by rivalry. In China, Mongol rule under the Yuan dynasty ended in 1368, when the Chinese rose in rebellion and established the Ming dynasty. The remnants of the Mongols retreated to the northern steppes, returning to their original life as nomadic tribes. In Persia and Iraq, the Ilkhanate fell first to the blows of the Mamluks and later to the armies of Tamerlane, who seized their lands to establish an empire under his own name. Thus, the Ilkhans vanished entirely from history. In Central Asia, the Chagatai Khanate was torn apart by internal strife. It broke into small warring states, stripped of any influence beyond their narrow borders. In Russia and Eastern Europe, the Golden Horde endured longer than the others, but it could not withstand the rise of the Russians. In 1480 came the decisive confrontation at the Ugra River between the forces of Ivan III of Moscow and the Mongols. No great battle was fought that day. Instead, the Mongols slowly withdrew. With this retreat, more than 2.5 centuries of Mongol domination over Russia came to an end. Thus, the Mongol Empire did not collapse all at once. It melted away like a glacier, breaking apart piece by piece. A rebellion here, a defeat there, endless quarrels among brothers and sons. The empire that had once united half the known world became nothing more than a memory in the pages of history. Yet the legacy of the Mongols did not vanish entirely. The trade routes they had established and the connections they had forged between East and West opened new doors for the world. As security along the Silk Road declined and caravans no longer traveled as safely as before, merchants began searching for new ways to reach the riches of the East. From this search arose a path across the seas, one that would lead Europe to the discovery of new continents and the dawn of an entirely different age. Thus, the fall of the Mongol Empire was not merely the end of a military power. It was the beginning of vast transformations that reshaped the course of world history. When we contemplate the story of the Mongols, we find that it is not merely a tale of conquest and destruction, nor only a chronicle of rise and collapse. It is a mirror reflecting the fate of every empire in history. Born from the womb of power, growing and flourishing, then slowly breaking apart into weakness until it vanishes. The Mongol Empire, which rose from the barren steppes of Mongolia, once stretched into the largest contiguous empire the world had ever seen. It subdued countless peoples, altered the course of global trade, and linked continents that had long been isolated from one another. But as the philosophers remind us, everything born in this world is destined to perish. Even the greatest of empires, no matter how mighty, must one day crumble. The Mongols left behind a contradictory legacy. On one hand, their name is forever linked with destruction and bloodshed. On the other, they became a driving force for the flourishing of trade, the exchange of knowledge, and the opening of the world to itself. Today, when we read their story in calm reflection, we are reminded of the cycle of history. How power never lasts, and how nations that build their glory on swords alone soon dissolve under the winds of time. Perhaps this is why the story of the Mongols endures as an eternal lesson, reminding us that everything in this world is transient. What truly remains is not the lands we conquer, nor the cities we build, but the ideas, the values, and the memories we leave behind. And now, after this long journey across centuries of history, you may close your eyes in peace. For the empire that began like a devastating storm ended as a tale whispered gently under the moonlight, no more than a soft echo in the memory of time.